Good afternoon, beautiful people, and happy Monday. Today, we're diving into a jaw-dropping turn in the case of New York Attorney General Letitia James. On one hand, she has famously proclaimed that no one is above the law. On the other hand, what we're about to unpack shows how her own so-called defense is inadvertently handing prosecutors the evidence that they need. If you are someone who believes in equal justice under the law, and you believe in holding big public officials accountable regardless of party, then you'll want to hear this, because this isn't about ideology so much as hypocrisy and the erosion of public trust. Let's get into it. Welcome to Nelly Miranda.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted on criminal bank fraud charges. James is being accused of having falsified records to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms.
As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Okay, so here are the key facts. On August 17, 2020, Letitia James signed a so-called second home rider tied to her purchase of a Norfolk, Virginia property. That document required her to keep the property available primarily as a residence for a borrower's personal use and enjoyment for at least 1 year. So that would be until August 17, 2021. Now, this is where things get interesting. In the months immediately after the purchase, her grandniece and children moved into the house full time during that exact 1 year compliance period. Meanwhile, James herself reported 0 personal use days for the property on her 2020 tax return. So the key question, did she actually use the property as required during the first year, or did she classify it differently, misled the lender, misled the insurance company, or misled tax and ethics filings? Because if the contract required her personal occupancy and she never personally used it, we may have a serious problem of representation and fraud. I think the most important part of this case is accountability. If you are going to demand accountability from others, corporate executives, politicians, etc., then you must be willing to apply the same standard when you're the public official.
I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to thank you for your prayers. I want to thank you for your emails. I want to thank you for your support. It has strengthened my spirit. But this is not about me. This is about all of us. And about a justice system which has been weaponized. This justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge and a weapon against those individuals who simply did their job and who stood up for the rule of law.
Now we ask, will she live by the same standard? She has since pleaded not guilty to the indictment. Now, here's where it gets especially ironic and telling. Politico published an article purporting to defend Letitia James. Their argument is the contract language allowed short-term rentals, so as long as the property was available primarily more than half of the year for the borrower's use. But when you dig deeper, as the White Collar Fraud article does, you see that Politico cited the very bulletin, Freddie Mac Bulletin 20197, that sets the standard. Let's read it directly from Freddie Mac's bulletin. It reads, in response to seller feedback, we are updating our requirements for second home mortgages to permit second homes with seasonal limitations on year-round occupancy to be eligible for sale to Freddie Mac, provided the appraisers includes at least one comparable sale with similar seasonal limitations to demonstrate the marketability of the subject property. Specify that the property may be rented out on a short-term basis, provided that the borrower keeps the property, securing the second home mortgage available primarily more than half of the calendar year as a residence for the borrower's personal use and enjoyment. And yet, what did James report? 0 personal use days. That is not more than half of the year. It's 0. So by defending James using that bulletin, Politico inadvertently underlines the violation. She didn't meet the standard that she was held to. And in my opinion, when advocacy media or partisan outlets mount your defense, be careful, because they might use language or documents that cut 2 ways. Here, the defense uses the regulatory language, but that language creates a benchmark which James apparently failed to meet. This matters because if you agreed with the defense's premise that the contract allowed the rental, then you must also accept the implication. If the contract allowed the rental only if you personally used the property more than half the year, and James used it 0 days, then you've accepted the defense's own bullet that triggers noncompliance. It's a trap. And I think this is exactly the kind of blind spot media and allied legal experts create when they reflexively defend a political figure instead of neutrally analyzing the facts. The result is always that the facts speak louder than the cheerleading. But as James has promised numerous times, she will not bend, bow, or capitulate.
I know what it feels like to be attacked for just doing your job, but I also know what it feels like to overcome adversity. And I will not bow. I will not break. I will not bend. I will not capitulate. I will not give in. I will not give up. And never ever cow down or back down or break or bend. So there's no fear today.
Next up, Sam's article highlights a series of 4 contradictory sworn statements by James about that property across different agencies. And here's the breakdown. To the bank in August 2020, she said she will occupy and use the property as her secondary residence. To the homeowner's insurance company, classified as owner-occupied non-seasonal use. And then to the IRS in April 2021, she filed Schedule E, treating the property as rental real estate, reporting 0 personal use days. To the New York State financial disclosure statements from 2020 to 2024, classified the property as an investment property and never disclosed the mortgage of $109,600. So in reality, beginning August 2020, the grandniece and children lived there full time, and James used it 0 days. So let's connect the dots. If you told the bank you were going to occupy the property, told the insurance company you were owner occupying, then turned around and told the IRS you had 0 personal use days and you were running it as a rental, then you've placed yourself in a very difficult legal position. And in my opinion, this pattern reflects what we often warn about: when public officials enjoy upscale perks but dodge accountability by using complex filings or using complicated legal language to hide the truth. If you are going to hold others to account for white collar or public trust misconduct, then you must allow the same spotlight on your side of the aisle. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about a piece from the New York Times titled, "In Letitia James' Case, Some Black Women See Their Own Family Sacrifice." This article was published on October 25th, and it takes a completely different angle. Instead of focusing on the facts or the evidence, it leans heavily on identity, framing Letitia James as a symbol of generational struggle and sacrifice for Black women rather than a public official facing serious allegations. The Times basically paints her as someone carrying the weight of her family and her community, suggesting that the criticism that she is facing is really about the burden placed on Black women who succeed. Now, while that is a compelling emotional narrative and it might make you want to cry, it doesn't erase the questions about honesty, accountability, and ethics. The issue here isn't her background, it's her behavior. So let's read from the article, shall we? Because as you know, the New York Times are great storytellers. It reads, "The federal indictment of New York's Attorney General centers on a home she purchased for a relative." So she purchased the home for the relative? Or is it her second home? Or are they talking about the other house that she bought with Shamise? Lord have mercy. "It is an act that rings deeply familiar to many." It goes on to say, "Letitia James would be among the many Black women that support their families," said Sarah Estep, an economist that has tracked the issue for years. "There's a culture of lift as you climb and look out for your family. Look out for your community. Help however you can," Ms. Davis said. "To be punished for that, it definitely feels like an attack and a disregard for our communities." The case has captured the attention of many Black women for both its precise details and its broad implications. President Trump has recently targeted several other Black women in powerful positions, including Lisa Cook, a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, and Fonnie Willis, the Georgia prosecutor who led an election interference case against him. And then it goes on to say, "This president just seems to have a natural distaste for Black women, and he's showing it more and more," said Lupe Todd Medina, a Democratic strategist in New York and founder of Effective Media Strategies, who has known Ms. James for more than 2 decades. What's frustrating about this is how quickly the victim card gets played. We all know Letitia James built her entire campaign on going after President Trump. That was her brand. So if that is the hill that she chose to stand on, she should have made sure that her own record was spotless. Instead, the media completely sidesteps the mortgage fraud allegations and focuses solely on identity. Yes, we all understand many Black families help their relatives who are struggling, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that was never the issue. The issue is the alleged mortgage fraud. She could have simply purchased that property as an investment home and paid the higher interest rate that came with it. That would have been honest, but she didn't. And now she's crying, woe is me, I'm just a Black woman. And here's the part that really gets to me. Letitia James prosecute people for mortgage fraud and bank fraud. So what happens if those people, those same people that she prosecutes, say they did it to help their families too? Would she give them a pass? Of course not. That is what makes this so hypocritical. You cannot enforce the law on others and then bend it when it comes to yourself. Letitia James is not the victim here. So the real question is, if an ordinary person misrepresented a mortgage like this, would they get the same treatment? And do you believe Letitia James' legal troubles will impact her political future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. And tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.